and that magic is real. Welcome back to Arguing Semantics. My name is James. Today we will be talking about the newest movie from Pixar and the newest addition to Disney+, Turning Red. Turning Red follows Mei Lin, a 13-year-old overachiever whose regimented life is thrown into chaos when she awakes to find out that she has transformed into a giant red panda. It's revealed that this is a condition passed down through her family but can be resolved by a ritual on the next red moon in 1 month. In the meantime, she has to deal with school pressures, home pressures, and social pressures, all while trying to manage her new abilities and find a way to see her favorite band in this coming-of-age tale. As usual, I will start by saying that this movie was great. It is very good. It's yet another in Pixar's long-running win streak that they've had going for years at this point. I won't say that this is the strongest movie they've made recently. In a lot of ways, the premise, while incredibly fun, is a bit overused. Most of what you kind of expect to happen in this movie is basically what happens, but it is a nice perspective on this sort of a tale. The metaphor in this movie is very, very on the nose. I mean, from moment one, it's very clear. The condition shows itself that this is an allegory for that particular time in a young woman's life, down to her mother bursting into the bathroom with an armful of pads and tampons. That being said, they do a pretty good job of taking that metaphor and running with it in some fun ways. It does get a little bit messy at times, but overall it's still pretty good. The voice performances are all very, very fun. They all feel real. They all do a good job of making these characters feel like the characters that they are. They all match their designs and they all match their characterizations in some very, very fun ways. One of the standouts being, we're going to have a lot of people who are going to have Abby as my spirit animal posts probably in the next couple of months. She is definitely the standout as far as the ridiculous cast of characters that you have. It is an animated movie, so the first thing you'll notice is that the animation itself is really, really good in this movie. The overall cinematography is pretty standard at this point. It's all exactly what you'd expect. Well-framed sequences, but very few shots within the cinematography itself are anything particularly special. It's just very well done, does exactly what it needs to do. Most of the personality of this movie instead comes through the animation itself. It's very clearly anime inspired in some really, really good ways, both between some of the jerky over-the-top motions of the characters as well as how they construct some of the facial expressions and even how they use 2D art in a lot of ways as well. Specifically, the things they do with the characters' eyes in this movie are incredibly fun as an extra layer to show their emotions. And on top of that, the very, very over-the-top characterizations of many of the characters. The animation does more to show who these people are than much of the rest of the movie. It's incredibly fun. The similarities of Mei Lin, both in her human form and red panda form, they very much do feel like the same person, just bigger and smaller. The setting itself is also very, very fun. They did some fun things with setting it in 2002 in Toronto. It gives the movie just a little bit different of a flavor than you kind of would expect from a lot of current fare, and gives an added layer to Mei Lin's cultural background as well. The fact that she works and lives basically in a Chinese temple in the middle of Toronto is an interesting little wrinkle, and how they kind of play with some of the prejudices that come with that is also interesting. I also like that they set it in 2002, but they don't beat you over the head with nostalgia. It's a lot of little things like the cell phones and references to pop stars and clothing styles, which is funny because you see some of the clothing styles that they wear in here are starting to come back. The 90s and early 2000s comeback is feeling real weird, guys. I'm not gonna lie. It does make for a slightly unique setting in it, even if the story itself isn't totally unique on its own. The characters themselves are all great. As I mentioned before, her friends are all unique forces and all add something in their own right to the story. Mei Lin herself is a wonderful, just right amount of precocious. In less adept hands, her character could be annoying and kind of hard to root for, but they do a good job of balancing her more over-the-top reactions and her kind of know-it-all, over-the-achiever nature with confidence and humor, but still balance her out with her friends and the fact that she cares so much for her friends and, you know, the quirky little things that she's into, and translating it more into just pure confidence, and also the fact that she feels like she knows who she is and what she likes, even if throughout the movie she decides to reassess many of those things. It never felt like her negative qualities were too overbearing, and managed to make her more endearing than anything else. And then watching her as she deals with this extreme situation and her friends all coming together, both to try to get enough money so they can go to the Four Town concert, as well as all of them coming together to deal with the condition that she has and figuring out how the group is shifting because of that, is all really well done. Most of the rest of the supporting cast is good. Dad as the late game VIP was really, really fun. He is delightfully just daddish. Some of the characters that show up later in the movie also have their own quirks that are fun. They do a good job of handling the kind of oppressive quality of some of her other relatives later as well. Might get into that a little bit in spoilers. The only problem is her mother very early on is set up as this very overbearing tiger mom type, that type of stereotype, which we've kind of seen in a lot of movies, but her overall characterization is really inconsistent, and part of that is the code switching between how she deals with her mom and how she deals with her daughter that sometimes came off as inconsistent. It overall worked, though. There wasn't too much. The characters in and of themselves overall worked. And it is nice to see some different types of cultural representation in a Pixar movie as well. They are both Disney and Pixar are slowly branching out and doing these different cultures in some really interesting ways. That's been really fun. As I said before, overall the story in and of itself worked pretty well. It was kind of tropey. It was a lot of what you expect from, I am this kind of a person and then this thing happens, and so now I'm reassessing my life from that, and then also pair that with the common clash between mother and daughter and what's expected of me versus what I want to be. It worked really well. It was a very good example of that. It just didn't do anything that was particularly surprising on that particular theme. There were some other themes that they did do very well. There was a work-life balance message that was very well handled throughout it. It's interesting watching this one after Encanto. There was a bit of a controversy over the fact that they pushed Encanto really hard at the end of the year, and then Turning Red did not get a theater release, instead going straight to Disney+. But after watching it, I can understand why. They both, in many ways, have similar themes. It's just arguably Encanto did them a little bit better, or did them in a little bit more of an interesting way. Themes of generational trauma, not being good enough, not being allowed to be yourself because you're trying to be the role that your family needs. Encanto just did a little bit better of a job of equating those to things like toxic positivity, or the resentments that come from being the person who sees them as the one who needs to fix everything for everybody, but other people just wanting to be a part of things and helping as well. Adding those layers kind of made Encanto a little bit more interesting, whereas this one sticks to a more straightforward, there are expectations in my family, my mom thinks I am this one thing, doesn't want me to grow up, that sort of stuff that we've kind of seen a lot of it before. I mean, even specifically talking about Asian moms, like this story in many ways has been told. It just hasn't been told exactly this way, in exactly this setting, with these types of characters and this type of animation in a way that still makes it unique and fun. The only other complaint that I really have is that the ritual to contain the panda spirit didn't totally make sense. It felt like there were some jumps in how that needed to function, and they didn't totally explain that particularly well, but many of the reveals that came along with that did work very well. The only other major thing to talk about overall was that the music in the movie was also really, really great, and finding out after the fact that a lot of it was actually written by Phineas Eilish, with Billie Eilish helping as well, to the point where Phineas is actually one of the boys in the boy band. It was really a fun thing to find out after the fact. The music and the tone and style all were things that they nailed really, really, really well. There were some other aspects of the plot that didn't totally work. Some characters, made face turns or heel turns that kind of happened suddenly and weren't totally justified. But other than those few things, the movie is still very, very good. And that being said, I am going to get into spoilers, so just skip ahead to right here-ish if you don't want to hear those things. But this should be a pretty quick run over of a few of the things that I liked and didn't like that are specific to the story. For those of you still here, the couple of other things to talk about story-wise that were good that are definitely spoilers. The kaiju fight at the end was great. Finding out that, they implied over and over again that her mom's panda spirit was particularly aggressive and particularly bad, but you don't find out just how much until the end of the movie in a sequence that is so good. Basically turning the end of the movie into a kaiju battle was so much fun. Seeing this big, single-minded version of her mother just being a mom, but a giant red panda, and seeing the juxtaposition of those two things where her only thought in her mind is destroying Thor Town because it's a toxic influence was really, really fun. And there are a lot of moments in that final fight that are really cool. Specifically seeing Mei Lin figure out her new abilities to the point where it's like, we're watching it, and when she figures out she can move further when she transforms, and I just turn to my wife and go, oh, she unlocked the double jump, was really, really great. And then seeing the aunts come in clutch at the end for that last fight scene too. One of my favorite details in the whole movie is that if you're watching at one point in that, one of her aunts, when they're coming in to try to help and save the day, one of her aunts is Naruto running, and it just made my night. It was so funny. Basically, that whole final sequence was great. The other thing being the ending on the whole, the actual final ending though, the falling action at the end, it was kind of exactly what I expected it to be. I literally called the fact that, well, she's turning into a red panda, and at the beginning of the movie, she's in a cardboard red panda suit doing the tours of the temple. It's at the end, she's just going to be doing the same thing, but as an actual panda. But it was still very cute, very well done, and, getting that little bit of a moment to say, hey, yeah, I'm still part of my family, and I'm still doing my family thing, but now I get to go hang out with my friends, and it's not weird when I'm into boys and stuff like that. There are only a couple of things in the second half that were a little bit weird. The fact that Tyler is the main antagonist through most of the movie, really harassing her, and then at the very end of the movie, he's just at the Four Town concert, and they all kind of immediately forgive him, and he's just part of the group. Felt really weird, because he did do some really toxic, mean-spirited stuff throughout the whole movie. He's literally making fun of her family and her culture for half the movie, and then they're just kind of like, yeah, he's cool. It just didn't work. The other thing that caught me kind of sideways and I felt weird was the fact that they make a big deal out of talking about her mom and how she actually attacked her grandmother when she was in panda form, but then the way to deal with the fight with her own mother is to literally knock her out. Literally, she gets into a physical fight with her mother, which kind of resolves everything, sort of. There's a little bit of a conversation where they resolve those things, but it just felt weird that in a movie about how they can't communicate, the problem isn't really solved with communication. It felt like that's where that should have gone, and instead she just unlocks her special attack and takes her down. It felt a little weird. Yeah, it felt a little ethically off. But overall, still totally worked, still totally fine. Just a couple of little things that really knocked it down from being a truly great movie. Alright, spoilers over. I do want to go back a bit, because the other thing that I really enjoyed in this movie is how they dealt with, talking once again about the obvious metaphor and the coming of age stuff, is this movie did a really good job of showing how her crushes and the new feelings of attraction that happen when you're a teenager manifest. Specifically how her crushes actually manifested in her brain and how she chose to deal with that was really, really fun. This movie does a great job of normalizing those initial feelings of attraction and the confusion of how to express that, especially from a female point of view. Showing her, suddenly realizing that she's like, oh, this person is totally cute, and oh, this is how I feel about them. But just showing how those feelings can manifest in ways that seem really weird to adults, but when you're a teenager and you can't fully process those feelings, they come out in kind of weird ways, specifically how she chooses to like draw and fantasize about her crushes is really, really fun. And I know for a portion of the audience it's going to feel very, very real. Like I said, it just does a good job of normalizing those feelings. And I think there are going to be some young adults in the audience who watch this and will feel seen and feel like, yeah, this is normal. This is normal what I'm going through. It does a very, very good job of that part of the coming of age tale. There's only really one other thing that I have a small complaint about. It overall does work in the movie, but considering there's a giant red panda, jumping around Toronto, not a lot of people seem at all fazed by this, to the point where it gets confusing at the end. Trying not to reveal anything, but there's one point where she gets into a physical altercation with somebody, and they just kind of treat it like she got into a fight with them, and it's kind of implied that they don't know that she did it as the panda, but it's also like she's still jumping around the city and multiple people see her, and she's doing social media and stuff, and nobody's reacting to the fact that there is a giant panda rampaging essentially through Toronto, and that magic is real. Especially when they don't do anything else to establish that people might not react to that. It just feels a little weird. But, like I said, overall, I still really, really enjoyed this movie, and I do think it's definitely worth your time, especially since it's free on Disney+. A lot of people should watch this movie. I think it would be interesting to see if it got a sequel, where they might go with it, especially with Mei Lin figuring out some new abilities by the end. I don't know if it needs one, but it could be fun. But definitely go and watch it. It only has a couple of things that really keep it from being truly great. It's a little bit tropey. A lot of it, the places it goes, is pretty much where you expect it to go. But it has so much personality. The animation is so much fun. Definitely feels unique, even though the story it tells is kind of well-tread territory. And just the characterizations and how she's dealing with being the panda are just incredibly fun. As I've said for many movies on here, it really is worth your time. Definitely a high recommendation. It just sits in that really nice 8 to 9 range, where it's not amazing, but it does do a good job of telling the story that it is, and you'll walk away from it feeling warm and fuzzy. That being said, though, my name is James, and this has been Arguing Semantics.
Like and subscribe.